and welcome to Establishing and Managing a Low Vision Support Group. Today's webinar comes to you from the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. The Council is a private, not-for-profit, community-based organization. We provide services, advocate legislation, and educate the public. You will have an opportunity to ask questions at 2 times during the webinar. You can type your question or comment into the box in the right side column and press enter on your keyboard. The question or comment will appear in the public chat box where all participants can see it. You can enter a question at any time. If you have a microphone and want to speak your question, press and hold down the control key and a raised hand will appear next to your name. Do this when the speaker asks for questions. You will hear a bleep sound when it's your turn to talk. Only one person can talk at a time. And the system automatically lines you up in a queue. So when the first person in queue is done speaking and lets go of the control key to let go of the mic, the next person in queue has the mic available at that time. If you need to leave before the end of the webinar, simply close your web browser or go to the File menu and down to Exit. The webinar will be archived and you will receive a link to that archive by Monday, May 2nd. Okay, today's speakers are Miranda Cole, Erica Wise, and Diane Mickelbank. Miranda is a PhD candidate at UW-Madison, where she obtained her master's in group communication. Her current research focuses on small group and also interpersonal communication. Erica Weiss is a social worker at Vision Forward Association in Milwaukee. She has many years of professional experience facilitating support groups for blind and visually impaired persons and their family members. In addition, she brings her lifelong personal experience in living, struggling, and thriving with vision loss to her work, as Erica has advanced retinitis pigmentosa. She is available to consult with anyone wanting to start or maintain a support group for visually impaired individuals. Diane Mickelbank has a Bachelor of Science degree in Therapeutic Recreation from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. She has been director of the Monona Senior Center for nearly 15 years, where their low vision support group has been meeting for over 3 decades. This group is one of Diane's favorites to facilitate, as the participants greatly appreciate having this group to gain strength from. Okay, so we're going to start with Miranda. Miranda will give some background information on support groups, and we'll stop for questions at that point. Then we'll go to Erica, who will talk about the support group structure that she uses at Vision Forward. That'll be followed by Diane, who will talk about the structure that she uses at Monona Senior Center, and then we'll have questions again at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Miranda.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk just generally kind of what support groups are and briefly touch on, a variety of contexts that they're used, benefits of having support groups versus kind of one-on-one education, counseling, things like that. So support groups, what makes them really unique compared to just other groups that we have in our daily lives is that they're composed of peers. So the members of these groups, there's going to be very little hierarchy among the members. They're very much going to be on an even playing field, really supporting the sense of community among them. So support groups are going to be composed of this group of peers, and I use the word peer a bit differently because across a lot of different support group situations, it's not necessarily in individuals of similar age or background, things like that. That's one reason that support groups can be so great, because it can bring together a really diverse community of individuals from different walks of life, situations, who are all kind of united by a common condition, identity, life situation, etc. So it can be really supportive in that situation. Like I said, really promoting diversity while kind of having this underlying characteristic, kind of grouping all of these individuals together in this supportive education community, this opportunity to kind of provide, like I said, that community, things like that. So what I mean by kind of underlying characteristics, support groups exist for a variety of situations, whether it's bereavement, substance abuse, depression, mental health issues are really, really common, such as disease, chronic illness, conditions, things like that. So members of support groups will tend to have this in common, whether it affects those members directly or they know somebody who is affected by that. But again, really providing this strong sense of community and bonding, kind of giving that likeness to connect these people. So we know from communication and psychology research that relationships, friendships, things like that are really based on liking and perceived similarities, which is one reason that support groups can just be so effective to help provide this sense of community, provide these education opportunities, because it's going to be a very unique.
We just lost Miranda on her computer, so we're going to switch her to a different computer so that she can continue. So it'll just take a second for her to just shift into a different seat. So hang on, not quite sure why her computer decided to stop paying attention, but I guess it was just its time. So, all right, be back in a second.
Okay, sorry about that. So we'll continue. Just talking kind of again about what a support group is. Okay, so another unique thing about support groups as opposed to just work groups, families, friendships, things like that, is that support groups are going to have an overarching goal or provide a service to group members. So one big thing of support groups is inherent in the name, right? This idea of support and understanding. And one really interesting thing about support groups and part of the effectiveness for their members is that they help provide this sense perception of support. And research on emotional support, emotional relationships, friendships, things like that really show that it's this perception of support is really what helps members feel engaged in these situations. So showing that it's more important in many situations than the actual support received. So just having these communities available where people can feel guided, part of something, can be really, really effective to bolster the feeling that patients, participants, whatnot, family members feel supported, in addition to giving an actual outlet, an opportunity for that support. And then it also helps to provide senses of community, sharing coping strategies, triumphs, pitfalls, etc., as well as educational opportunities from facilitators and program leaders. So overarching, there's two different types of support groups. The first is actually talk about, there's an opposite order from how they're on the slides. So the first to touch on is for temporary situations such as bereavement, things like that, in a very classical sense. And then there's also more ongoing permanent conditions. So for situations that are going to affect individuals for longer periods of time. So things that would fall into this category could be LGBT support groups, depression, other illnesses or identity factors, as well as just life situations and conditions, such as vision impairment. So these more ongoing permanent types of support groups provide lots of its services and education opportunities, in addition to psychological benefits that I've already touched on, so the senses of community, support, and things like that. These can also be a really great place to educate members with things like vision impairment, educating those that's affected by, as well as people in their lives, in order to just opportunities, education, things like that, while providing these unique social outlets. And then away with another type of kind of variance within this ongoing or permanent set of support groups is the amount of facilitation. So that's what I mean by that is the variance with regard to the degree that a facilitator is really guiding the group interaction. So, for example, group therapy from the psychological perspective is going to be much more structured, so kind of actively educating and teaching skills to members, where there could be other groups that are less structured, so more about members' needs, stories, and narratives. And this is definitely a spectrum. So there is a range where groups are really effective when they're a blend of the two, so helping to accomplish many, many goals. So there is that kind of structured educational aspect while maintaining that kind of sense of community to help improve just any type of coping strategies or just kind of strategies to incorporate skills into everyday life. So then, just to touch a little bit more directly on benefits of groups, of support groups, the first three somewhat go hand in hand. So again, that sense of community, because it's very unique by having a group of individuals all kind of united by a common characteristic or situation, can really help to provide emotional support and a sense of community where perhaps friends and family aren't quite as aren't quite as able to relate to that. You know, without going through something yourself, there is a limit to the amount of empathy and that one can provide. So support groups are really great because they can provide, again, this perception of support where maybe words fall short or situations that individuals can't necessarily put words to, but just having others who are kindred in that situation can be really, really effective. There's also a sense of catharsis, getting to talk about experiences with people who really firsthand understand them. Many situations can be very unique and hard to describe. So again, just giving that opportunity where words sometimes might fall short. And then there's that opportunity for education, so learning both from facilitators and also from group members. So learning strategies for daily life, talking about what skills have been successful, maybe less successful in the past, things that you've tried, in addition, again, to just this overall sense of friendship and support, knowing that you're not alone and getting to engage that with people from many different situations and walks of life. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, I'm definitely more than happy to answer them at this point.
Can you hear my mic now?
Yes, yep, you're coming through, Francis.
Well, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. One is there a group size that matters in terms of the effectiveness of a support group, or does that not matter?
Yeah, that's a great question, because support groups definitely, it can get too big in that the individuals in it don't necessarily feel quite as engaged or connected, but it really is going to depend on the individual. So research defines groups as anything from 3 just kind of on up. In practice, usually once we get to around the double digits, maybe upwards of 15 is kind of that upper limit where everyone can still feel connected, but much beyond that, it starts then kind of breaking almost into smaller groups within that. So yeah, keeping it, I'd say, capped around 15. But again, it really depends on the group dynamic.
Is there a time like how often you should have meetings?
Okay, yeah, great question about how often to meet. So, I mean, common practice in like therapeutic sessions is often weekly meetings, but certainly depending on the group, monthly could also be the way to go. I would say if you're kind of practicing developing a skill, kind of giving, if there's any type of take-home, something like that, having more frequent meetings is going to be more helpful to let members come together, kind of debrief, here's what I did this week, here's how this is going, where if it's more just kind of one and done type of education or support, then less frequent, so maybe every other week or monthly meetings would definitely be effective. And then I see a couple questions as well in the chat. So Katie's question, managing members who dominate the conversation. Yes, this absolutely can be an issue. So, and that's where the role of a facilitator comes in, and that's one of the beauties of having a facilitator, even in groups that are focusing very much towards the members contributing and doing a lot of the talking, that a facilitator can step in to encourage maybe quieter members to talk, kind of solicit responses, while at the same time sort of politely, maybe not silencing, but limiting the amount to which someone may be that is more overbearing and speaking to allow more of an even distribution among group members. So that's a great time, like I said, for the facilitator to step in and maybe not so much silence members as much to rather encourage others to speak and kind of solicit things from those who are a little bit more quiet. So yeah, then characteristics of facilitators. It's kind of one really anyone can be a facilitator. A quality facilitator is definitely going to be engaged and passionate. I mean, if we think back to maybe classroom settings that we've all been in, that teachers and educators like that who are particularly effective are going to be ones who are passionate about the topic. And so types of support groups, it's not really going to be any different. So I think that people are very receptive and responsive to when it's apparent that someone cares. So just kind of having that situation with a facilitator is really effective. And then I think that another characteristic would just being prepared. So coming in, knowing kind of the goals of that group session, of that meeting, and kind of keeping the group in line with that. So being responsive to their needs, but just coming in prepared with an agenda, prepared session, as opposed to just kind of showing up for an amount of time. Is really going to help a facilitator be effective.
Jean, would you like me to go ahead?
Okay, do we have any other questions for Miranda? And she'll still be here if questions come up a little bit later on that are a little bit more appropriate for her, but I'll just let it go for a second more here to see if anybody has any other question before we move on to the next speaker. Okay, so we will go ahead and go on and listen to Erica Weiss, who is from Vision Forward in Milwaukee. So Erica, I will turn my mic off and let you get started.
All right, thank you, Jean. And good morning, everybody. In my portion here of the webinar, I'm going to talk with you about the kind of group where there is not a presenter, but instead is one where the group member discussion is the topic, so to speak, of the meeting. And I think a lot of Miranda's comments really came in line with this type of support group. So another word I heard her using quite a bit was facilitator rather than leader. So the idea of that managing person is to make sure that the conversation is flowing, that people are participating, and not so much being in charge and needing to come up with the right answers, but really helping the whole group enjoy and participate in the experience, and really enabling them to bring their experiences of living with vision impairment to a group who has a unique ability to hear what they are going through, to acknowledge that, and to present other possibilities. And so, of course, the ideal is for everybody to speak. So typically what we do here in starting a group is a couple of, so to speak, ground rules for the group. One is that importance of confidentiality, that people really understand that there are going to be some meaningful things shared between people in the group, at least if things are going right. That's the kind of comments you'll be getting from group members. So that you want to stress each time that people need to respect the privacy of the conversation that you're having, and that they not take those comments outside the group. The second important rule is for people to know that because the group is so much based on discussion, that they may be called on at a time when they were maybe not ready, didn't have an opinion, don't feel confident, for whatever reason, do not want to comment, and that every group member has that option to pass. To just say, I don't have anything to say on this, or I want to pass at this point. I find that very few people pass. But knowing that they have that option, I think, gives people that feeling of safety that they're not going to be caught off guard if they don't really have anything that they want to say. I also think it's important to kind of outline for the group your role as the facilitator, to say that you're going to be the one just kind of helping everybody manage the conversation, to share the time, because you've got limited time. If you go too long, people find that it's more time commitment maybe than they want to give. So to have a time limit, and I find usually about 90 minutes works very well, with a little time for people to linger kind of informally afterwards. But to say because the time is limited and shared, that as the facilitator, sometime you might be asking people to kind of get back to the subject, or let's hear from someone else. So, you're going to do a little bit of managing, so that if you need to do that later, you've already told them that that is kind of the role that you'll be taking on. So to set up a meeting, something that we typically do is called the check-in. And this idea is that each group member has a very short time, sometimes only a couple of minutes. I think the exception to this is maybe that first group meeting where you might need a little bit more time for each person. Let's say you have 3 minutes for each person and you've got 10 people. Well, that's a half an hour of your time. But it can be a very important and useful time in setting up sort of the agenda for that meeting. So the idea is each member in turn gives a little introductory comment about themselves, maybe how their week has gone, and what their vision impairment is. As the facilitator, you can ask them to say something specific or just to introduce themselves. And then the second part is for them to state what they'd like to talk about in this group session. And sometimes people won't have anything, which is perfectly fine. But as you go around and people say, well, I'd like to talk about the fact that my family doesn't understand, or I don't know how to get help, whatever the issues people bring up, as a facilitator, you keep track of all those things people want to talk about. Now, something that's going to typically happen is one person will begin to talk in their part of the check-in, and someone else is going to want to comment on it. You're going to need to stop people at that time and say, until we go around to each member, we won't have an open discussion. And it can seem a little artificial at first, but as people get used to it, it's really a good way for your talkative members to do a little bit more listening, to hear what each of the group members is about a little bit, and for the quiet members to have that chance to say something. So everyone is spoken before the general discussion begins. So then when you've gone around and everyone's put their statements out, you kind of have to decide which topic you're going to go with first. And sometimes it doesn't matter, but sometimes it'll be clear that there's one that somebody was feeling pretty strongly about, or one that maybe 3 people had a similar thing to say. And so you may want to start with those particular topics and bring out the discussion with everyone. When you do have the discussion, a few things that I see happening with groups is there often is a tendency to want to come up with one answer. So as the facilitator, really promote a lot of ideas. And if someone hasn't had an idea, maybe bring them into the conversation so that there's no one right answer for anybody. And there maybe are some things that a lot of us maybe haven't thought about until we've gotten into this discussion. You want to, as I said, keep the topic on, or keep the group on the topic. Sometimes groups will stray a little bit into the weather, the election, that sort of thing, and you want to have some flexibility for people to talk about other things other than their vision impairment. But if you feel it's going too long, you may say, we need to get back to the topic that Margaret was talking about. Or remember we were on the topic of some feelings of sadness, or whatever had been the original topic, to bring the group back to it. So there's not too much time on outside topics. And you may find sometimes there's another good topic that is introduced that you might say, can we hold that one? Let's finish with what we're talking about, and let's come back to this other topic because it's very good. So you're kind of managing the conversation as you go along. The other thing that I would emphasize is that in groups, I think it's important to have a place for people to really express their pain, their struggle, their difficulties, their anger. And sometimes group members will want to encourage people to cheer up or be positive, or it could be worse. And there's a place for all of that. But be sure that your members have a place first to talk about what makes it hard in having a vision impairment. This is the place where they can really air that and get some ideas about where they might go with that. At the end of maybe I'd like to talk with you more about some of the things that we're doing at Vision Forward to help promote other support groups happening, because we just see so much growth that happens with people in these groups. So I look forward to your questions, but at this point, Diane will be taking over the next part of our webinar. Diane?
Okay, thank you very much, Erica. So at the Monona Senior Center, our low vision group is structured a little differently. We meet monthly, and we kind of go on the focus where we do have a speaker each month, or we try to for the majority of the time, with some social time after. Just a little background on our group. On average, we have about 16 people who attend each month. We have had as many as 25 for more of a social gathering, and we do drop as low as maybe 10 to 12. In 2015, our group was made up of 51 different people. So this could include caregivers, drivers, as well as those who are attending the group dealing with vision loss. So that shows many of our participants are regular and they come quite often, but we also have introduced new members on a regular basis, and obviously some discontinued participation. Transportation is provided for free for those participants that are within a certain distance from our location, and that's run through a county grant, so we're very fortunate to have that option. Each month between 4 and 8 people will use this service. In the city of Monona, we do have public transportation, but it is limited by our city limits. Therefore, with this grant, we are able to include those who live outside our city limits to participate in this group. We call a list of regular attendees 1 week before our meeting as a reminder to see if they're interested in attending, and this also allows us to make transportation arrangements. We have some participants who even appreciate a morning of reminder phone call, and this makes sure that they're ready for the bus, and usually helps their attendance so that we don't have some, well, I forgot to attend type of situations. Our meetings begin at 11 o'clock, and like I said, we have a speaker about 80% of the time. Every January we do a brainstorm session, so we talk about what would we like to learn about in the coming months, and we get a lot of great ideas from our participants at that meeting. And every December, we do just a much more social gathering, and it might be music or something that's interactive, but our participants just like to have a time to kind of kick back and maybe not focus on the challenges of low vision. Let's just enjoy each other's company. So that's been a great way for people to know each other on a more social level. Following our speaker, we do serve a meal. So we do the presentation, and then anyone who's interested could stay for a meal. This, if we do have a speaker, offers the social component that might be important for those attending. Sometimes our speaker can stay, which allows a little extra time for questions or connecting with them one-on-one if they wanted to go a little deeper into the topic that was presented. And the Monona Senior Center is not a nutrition site, so those of you who might be associated with a senior center, we don't have that built-in component of a nutrition program. So the participants who choose to stay for the meal do pay, and it's $6 per person to cover the cost of the meal. Getting back to our January brainstorm session, our participants, I always emphasize this is their group. So they not only give us suggestions for topics that would help them, but also how this group, how the structure of our group can improve. So for example, we have started using a microphone for our participants. Not only are they dealing with low vision, but there's some hearing loss that makes it a challenge. In groups, when there is 15 people, sometimes it's tough to hear one another. So every participant uses a microphone, so everyone can hear one another. And at first I was hesitant that it would deter some participation in speaking, but it really hasn't. I walk around and they don't have to hold it, so I'll have it right there for them to speak. So it hasn't really caused any issues, and some of them absolutely love the mic, and they just want to, now they'll grab it and share a joke, and they're still very social, even though a microphone is sometimes intimidating. As I was reviewing the information that was shared prior to this webinar, the suggestions for speakers that were provided are fantastic. We've used many of them. And we have found that our participants sometimes want to hear about topics that may not be related to vision loss. For example, sleeping. How do I get better sleep at night? They might be health related, nutrition, diabetes. So we try to accommodate that if we find that there's a good number of our participants that would also benefit from that information. Again, as suggested in the resource section that Jean had shared prior to the webinar, we do emphasize with our speakers that they really need to tailor their presentation to those with low vision. So many speakers want to come in and do a PowerPoint, and although we allow that, we do tell them you really need to describe what's being presented, because there are some of our participants who cannot see the screen at all. This does seem to help, and we are very fortunate. Our participants are not shy about bringing it to our attention, to the attention of the speakers, that they simply cannot see the slides. You need to describe better, so that makes it more comfortable for them. For each of our low vision support groups, we have at least 2 volunteers who help with making sure everybody has coffee or water, making them feel comfortable, and if they get up to use the restroom, making sure that our volunteers are trained is also helpful, just so that they have some courtesy of how you interact with those with low vision. So instead of taking an arm, offering your arm if they need some assistance to the restroom. When a plate is served, we note where items are based on the numbers of a clock. So, for example, your potatoes are at 3 o'clock, corn is at 6, and the chicken is at 10 o'clock. And there is sometimes assistance needed with getting their meal ready so that it's not extra messy with cutting pieces of food or things like that. So we try to make them feel as comfortable as possible, as eating in public can be a challenge. New participants are always a joy to see. We introduce ourselves around the table, and I try to come up with some fun thing to share about ourselves. We do go through and talk about what are we dealing with vision loss, but sometimes people just want to know, do you have a pet, or something fun about one another. So as others have talked about, our low vision group becomes like a family. Everyone gets to know one another. From a facilitator standpoint, we do put a lot of work up front into providing a meal that would be appropriate and setting up speakers, but our participants are so grateful. I get the sense that they do feel like this is their group. They give me a lot of input, and for some, they've expressed that this is their only outing. With the transportation provided, this is something that they really look forward to. We are honored to be able to offer it, and we really think it's a valuable program. So that concludes my overview of how we run our low vision support group at the Monona Senior Center. And I think this is when we can open up questions for both Erica and myself.
This is Jim from Shawano. My question is, how important is record keeping other than keeping the names and phone numbers for contact information? Do you maintain minutes and meeting minutes and follow sort of a Robert's Rule of Order type thing?
This is Erica. In my group meetings, we do not have minutes. I do keep track of the people who have attended and a little bit about the discussion that we've had, because sometimes they'll remind me that we maybe didn't get to everything in the previous meeting and we want to come back to it. or just to show kind of what this group has covered, that if I need to bring some ideas in, because something I hadn't mentioned is if no one has anything, oh, I don't have anything that specific I want to talk about. Sometimes the group will come to that. As a facilitator, then I want to have some ideas. So I just keep some general notes about what has happened in each one of those groups, but not minutes that the members get.
And in Monona, we also do not keep this isn't a formal meeting, so we don't keep any minutes. We do track attendance. I track our presenters so that I know when was the last time we had this topic presented. And of course, for the transportation grant, we track who is provided a ride to our group. But otherwise, it's much more informal than that. There's no like opening of the meeting and conclusion. It's much more of a conversation.
This is Jim again from Shawano. Another question I have is I participate in a low vision group here that in the last 5 years has started to really diminish in numbers. And I'm wondering about the maintenance of this group, or should we consider just starting a new group with some facilitators? We're entirely run by ourselves and all of us are visually impaired.
Boy, Jim, I sympathize with you. I think so many people are at that point of trying to get enough members to keep a group going, and you see how much value it has for the people who have participated, so you want to continue to offer something. One of the things that we are doing at Vision Forward is bringing together people who are doing groups in this corner of the state to try to help each other to get the word out that support groups are happening, and that if those doctors would please refer to us, and I figure if they know where to send people, that would help. I would think you could bring new people into the group that already exists, but do you see that being a disadvantage?
Hi, this is Renee from Chippewa Falls, and a few questions. I was wondering where is Ms. Monona, and is there an average age of participants or age range, and I assume you do not charge for support groups, but do you take donations? We have a support group in Eau Claire once a month, and there's about 15 of us, and it ranges from mid 40s to 90s, and we have speakers every month, and it's very interesting, and we've all become really good friends. I've been going for about a year now. When I found out about it, and I gave it to my eye doctor so he can tell people about it, and our Al Thompson, our office for the blind and visually impaired person. He lets people know about it too. So that's a way to get it out the word as well. Well, thank you. Did you hear my questions? I'm not sure.
Okay. Yes, we did hear your questions. Monona is actually a suburb of Madison, so we're surrounded by water and Madison, so we're fortunate to have access to a lot of great professionals in this area, and we tap into that for our speakers. The average age of our participants, we are a senior center, so we tend to have retirees, obviously. I'd say mid-60s to mid-80s are the ages of people who participate in this group. Do we charge? We don't charge for people to just come to the support group. If they're staying for lunch, like I mentioned earlier, there is a charge for that, but people can just come for the conversation or the speaker and are not obligated to stay. While I have the mic, I'm going to jump back to Jim's question about diminishing numbers. I think we all go through that sometimes, and what happened with us in Monona is we kind of promoted our group the same way all the time in our newsletter, and we were doing fine, so we didn't do anything more than that. But when we needed to mix it up, we got the word out again, and Erica mentioned this, so we put flyers up at various facilities, churches, the library, and just got the word out. Sometimes you just have to flurry that every once in a while, and like Erica said, reminding people that this exists. And then we tend to draw new people in who don't realize that our group exists, and that helps for a little while.
I was also going to comment about the diminishing numbers because I had a group out in Platteville, which is in the southwest corner of the state. And I had a regular, consistent group of people who met for a little over 3 years. And we decided this year that we were going to take this year off because we were having a little bit of difficulty with redundancy and speakers and ideas. So we're just taking a little bit of a break, and then we will start up again after the first of the year. Another thing that group did is that they took a month off. They took 2 months off in the winter when the weather was bad because people had to drive in or find somebody who could drive them in. And so they did take off December and January because of the weather and also because of the holidays. And that was a help to have that kind of a break in the beginning of the year for them.
Jean?
Yeah, Fran, go ahead.
We've been having that same problem, and we actually quit having meetings last fall. And we usually took 2 months off in the summer because all of our participants went sightseeing. And it didn't, if that group in Platteville, it isn't hurting them to take the year off?
It's hard to answer about whether or not it's hurting them. There were some members who were quite sad to see it go on hiatus for a year. They all recognized that for those of us who were facilitating and for some of the members that we did need to have a break. So they understood that aspect of it. They will look forward, I think, to having it start up again for some of the members. We tried to offer some options for them, so that town also had like a senior center that did have other programs that they could participate in, and a senior center director who was more than willing to have people come in and be integrated into some of their programs. So we tried to give them some options, but there were not a lot of options, as many of you in rural areas know, that if one group stops, that there's not another group that people can automatically move to. So, yeah, there probably were some people who were a little more sadder than others when the group took that break.
Well, we've been taking a break, like I said, since last fall. And I'm thinking of sending out a newsletter that maybe we have like a, what that lady called, I can't remember now what she called it, but where we all get together, the ones that were coming, and maybe have like a bull session and decide what we want to do and see how that works, because the ones that were coming were very consistent.
So yes, we call it a brainstorm session, our January session that we talk about. And I always try to prep our group saying, start to think about it, because if you don't prep them, they sometimes don't come with ideas. So I think that's a great idea. That makes it their group and that sense of belonging.
Okay, I'm going to ask, there was a comment in the public chat that from Katie that on Stevens Point they also take a break for part of the year. We met April through November and then in December, so that there's also some break time, which keeps it a little fresher, I think. I'm going to ask Erica, because some of the groups that Vision Forward has are time limited, aren't they?
Yes, we do have a combination of different kinds of groups, and we offer a 5-week group, which is very helpful in forming connections with people, that it's every week for a while. Then after that, they're invited to monthly ongoing meetings if they want to continue, but those 5 weeks in a row really help people who have not been in a support group before kind of think about on a deeper level what their vision impairment means in their life and how they want to manage that and how they want to get support from other people. And then that 5 weeks is over, and they do have the opportunity, though, to come back, because a lot of people, I find, still want to get that support to keep going, and they've met people that they really enjoy. So we have sort of a combination of those two things going.
Okay, thanks, Erica, for telling a little bit more about that short-term group that you have. The other question that I was going to just put out to people is, anybody feel free to tell a little bit about the group that you have, or things in particular that you have found successful in the group that you might be attending or managing.
Not sure how to. Hi, this is Renee from Chippewa Falls again, and yes, we take a break over the winter. We did not meet December, January, February. We have speakers every month, and this month we're having Becky Mann from the Wisconsin talking book and braille book and library come up. We've had a guy from a store that sells products for the blind, visually impaired, doctor. I have given a few talks about my guide dog, my world travels and my white water canoeing that I do with my husband, and I'm blind. I have no vision, and Also, we do have a meal. We do have a meal beforehand. People want if people want to do that, want to that. It's do that. Provided through the county, and it's 75, which is not bad, and then the meeting is usually about an hour, and it's held at an apartment building. Few of the people that attend live there, and I think it's really fun. It's a really fun group, and you just gotta keep it upbeat, and beat, and to make people come back, and this webinar has been interesting. Thank you for putting it on.
Okay, I just cleared all the speakers. I know Jim had a comment and Erica had a comment, so I'm going to get off and let you guys do your comments, and then I will come back and just do a wrap-up since our time is running out on us. So turn it over to Jim and then Erica.
Thank you. This again is Jim from Shawano. Our group is called VIP. We meet monthly at the local hospital. Problem in our area is transportation. We only have 2 cabs in the city. One of them is handicap accessible, and we have a couple members that are handicapped. We have people outside the city limits that would like to attend, but as I said, transportation is an issue. We do have an established mission statement and brochures available that I think we just need to update, and I like the suggestions that were made about maybe getting out to doctors' offices and the ministers so they can tell their congregations about us. I'm hoping we can build and do some planning. I also appreciate the hiatus idea, maybe to take a break and have our core group get together and do some planning rather than worrying about the meetings, do some planning for the future. Again, I too want to thank everybody for putting on this seminar, and I will now sign off.
And this is Erica with just a final comment that Vision Forward is really looking for ways to support people in doing groups. I specifically, in the kind of group I was describing, we've put in a grant to get leadership training. So if that does happen, we get the money for that. We'll be letting everyone know. But if anyone feels that I can be helpful with any questions, meanwhile, I would certainly be open to that. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, this is Corrine Brown, and Debbie Cordova is with me. We are thinking we are going to have to start a new group in Green Bay, and we're looking at the best way to do that. There is a dying group, but the leadership is such that it would be World War III if we suggested, hey, we need to reorganize. There are certain things that have happened that we really think it's necessary to split off. But we're looking for ideas as to the best way to get this ball rolling. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to tell you that I did send an email out right before the webinar today that includes handouts, and each of the handouts has contact information on it. So 2 of the handouts were from Erica from Vision Forward, and her email and phone number are on those handouts. One of those handouts tells about the different groups that they have at Vision Forward, and then one is just a flyer describing that they use to alert people about their groups. So Erica's contact information is on there if you would like to ask her questions. Diane also had a handout about the Monona Senior Center and how they organize themselves, and her contact information is at the bottom of that one. And then one of the handouts was for me with resources on it and ideas for different discussion groups, and my contact information is at the bottom of that one. So feel free to, let people know if you have questions as they come up, and people might be able to give you a little bit of a leg up on trying to solve some of the issues that you might encounter with your groups. So just to start wrapping up for today, first, I want to thank Miranda, Eric, and Diane for providing us with all the good information and for their handouts. I'd like to thank you for attending our webinar, and I also need to thank, well, I don't need to, but I want to thank our webinar sponsors, MG&E Foundation and Smith & Jesslyn, and their donations help pay for us to have the web room available for the webinars that we do. Our next webinar is going to be in August, and it's going to be on August 17th, and that topic will be on when to stop driving. So more information on that will be coming in June, and if that fits you, then do feel free to come and join us on that date. Okay, we're going to go to a SurveyMonkey survey as soon as I get it typed in here. Oops.